Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Coach Kyle of Freedom Running Club, and I've got another study to share with you here today in this study breakdown evidence review. And we cited this in our discussion about hill training in one of our opinion versus evidence series, but I wanted to break it down a little bit more because I think it might be beneficial for people who are thinking about adding some hill training to their training regimen, especially as they might be getting ready to start training or have just started training for maybe a fall goal marathon or other type of race distance. So this one has a bit of a long title, and I'm going to be putting it up on the screen just like I always do with all these so you can look at it yourself. Never trust what anybody says online in terms of what a study says. All of these should be open access for you to be able to find yourself from either a link, PMC number, the title, author. I'm going to put all that in the description down below. But it is called The Impact of Hill Training on Middle and Long Distance Athletes, with specific reference to Oromia Waterworks Athletics Club, Ethiopia. I may have butchered that name. This one is interesting because it was looking specifically at long-term hill training. So sometimes people will do hill training just in their base phase of the season, and this one was a study that was looking at 12 weeks of dedicated hill training, but then they also tracked what was going on in these different metrics that were improving while doing the hills for 4 weeks after ceasing hill training. So in terms of timing when you might want to do this, we're talking about 16 weeks total that they're looking at this for it. So it was 32 athletes. They were either 800-meter runners or 10K runners. So yeah, middle distance, those are the only two distances they were looking at here in terms of the goal race for these athletes, so not in between, but it gives you an idea that it can help a pretty big group of people here. But still, if you think about the metrics they're improving, it can definitely help with something like a 15K, half marathon, full marathon, just looking at different key metrics that people are trying to improve. Again, 12 weeks of this hill training, and they were doing pre-test and then training throughout, and it was after 8 weeks of not training, so they had a break afterwards. So two different groups here, ones that were doing the hill training, ones that were not doing the hill training, and they were doing a pre-test in terms of VO2 max, their resting heart rate, what they called strength endurance, race performance. Consistency was like, did they continue to improve after they ceased the training? And they also wanted to make sure that this wasn't increasing injury rate by doing hills, and that's something that they looked at as well. The people in the hill side of this that were doing the hill training, they were doing 2 hills per week, with the hill sessions being not even that long. We're talking about 40 to 60 feet only. So if you're someone that's having difficulty finding a hill that you think might be long enough, 40 to 60 feet is not that long. So it's not really going to take a lot for you to find a safe hill to do something like this. I live personally in Tampa. We are the flattest state in the United States, and I go and find a safe overpass that goes over an interstate by us that's separated with a cement barrier from the road. Take a look. You will be able to find a hill of 40 to 60 meters, so you can incorporate this into your training as well, if it's right for you in terms of things like, I've mentioned this in a previous video, sometimes people that have issues with their hips might get this aggravated with hill training. Make sure it makes sense for you. But again, if you're gearing up and you've never really done dedicated hill training, when you hear what goes on for the athletes in this and what's improving, you might want to look to add this in a safe way for yourself. So these were the different things that they were looking at, and I'm going to go and find a specific place here that I think is really sort of impactful. But essentially, so the main finding of the study was that hill training can significantly improve all these different measures. So the people that were doing it, they got improvement in all those measures that they were testing over and above the people that were doing training that did not include these hill trainings 2 times a week of 40 to 60 feet for 12 weeks. So it improved their VO2 max, it improved their resting heart rate, it improved their speed endurance. And they looked at that a couple different ways, how they were testing that. Their actual race performance. So they were actually doing a key race at the end of this block, and that's how they were doing this race. It wasn't just like going and doing a time trial. It was an actual race that they were doing. Interesting, the improvements in VO2 max and all these other things, VO2 max, speed endurance, and race performance, they were attained without significant injury risk. So they actually found, I think there was actually more injuries in the group, double check that, and I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it, in the group that wasn't doing hill training. So sometimes people might think, I can't do hills, I'm going to get myself hurt. This study, this one study, again, it's not a systematic review or anything, it's one specific study they were looking at. It did not change the risk of injury status from these athletes. These results strongly support the application of hill training in distance running athletes. And so this idea that you might want to include this in anything. And again, I know this was 800 meters to 10K. A lot of people watching this, you might be getting ready for a fall marathon. If you think about things like your resting heart rate, a key indicator of improved aerobic fitness, your VO2 max, your speed endurance, maybe not so important for your actual these longer distance races, but those first two really kind of a big thing in terms of improving your performance, but also the idea that you're not risking injury when you do this too, at least based on this study. So that was really interesting when you were looking at the actual application of it. And the part that I think was also interesting was the fact that the people that when they had done the hills, once they ceased the training, they continued to see improvements in these areas over and above the people that did not do hill training. So there was something about doing these hills that led to continued and consistent improvement even after the hills had ceased. So I'm a big believer in doing hill training pretty much throughout. You adjust how you're doing the hills based on the part of the season that you're in, what the goal race is, the athlete themselves, their training age, chronological age, all those different things, injury history, all those things that I mentioned before. And then as you're getting to the very end of the season, you stop doing them. I think this probably has something to do, and this is my opinion when it comes to this, the idea that these are very plyometric in nature and they're typically strength type runs, and that takes a lot of time to improve. But it also takes a lot of time to detrain, a little bit more than some of these other measures that we look at. So that's why doing these maybe up and into 4 or so weeks, when you're starting your taper period and you can kind of go away from doing these, this also suggests you'll continue to see the benefits of this type of training if you've done it for a consistent period of time, again, 12 weeks, when you're actually doing it. Yeah, so, and it maintained over 4-week period as programming shifted towards hill-free training at the end, which makes sense. You don't want to add any particular extra fatigue, which hills are designed to add extra fatigue as you're getting into your championship race. I always thought that it might have to do with with potential injury risk, especially if you're doing like downhill training. They were just doing uphill training in this, but at least with these types of hills, you're talking about these very short, powerful hill intervals. It didn't seem to increase any injury rates. So that's a really interesting study. If you're at all interested in maybe chatting about this, you can ask those in the comments down below. Maybe you've never done hill training. Maybe you're also in Central Florida and you're having difficulty finding hills. We can talk about that in the comments down below. If you also maybe want a little bit more of a deep dive on your own training or looking at training gaps, there is a link in the description here. You can sign up for a free session where I'll sit down and talk to you about maybe different things, like maybe hill training is missing in your actual race buildup, and maybe that's what's been holding you back, or maybe something else. But really interesting study. I encourage you to take a look at it. It's not super long. It was less than 20 pages, but some of those were just charts that you can look at, and doesn't take nearly as long to read if it's just a whole bunch of text. But I really encourage you to take a look at it yourself, especially if you're someone who's been interested in adding hill training and maybe you've been hesitant for one reason or another. Some pretty compelling reasons why you might want to add it to your own training.